This episode of Basics is presented by The Singleton. Great neat, over ice, or mixed into a cocktail, The Singleton is a versatile, award-winning single malt. It's perfect if you're new to Scotch, light and slightly sweet from being aged in bourbon oak barrels. I collaborated with The Singleton to create a series of food and cocktail pairings. Across these episodes, I'll show you how to utilize 3 different cuts of meat in different ways. Today, that cut is flank steak, which I'll be using in 3 delicious variations for steak pinwheels. Let's get down to basics. So flank steak is perfect for pinwheels because of its size, shape, intramuscular fat content, and the distinct grain of its muscle fibers. First we want to trim off any excess fat or sinew, and then we're going to butterfly it, basically cut it in half widthwise and open it up like a book. And you want to do this with the grain of the meat, that is, you want your knife to be aligned with the direction the meat fibers are pointing. Just make long, careful cuts starting at the thinner side of the piece of beef, leaving about a ½ inch uncut at the end so that you can open it up like a book. Then if you want extra super tender pinwheels, you can use one of these scary looking devices. This is a needle beef tenderizer, normally used for making chicken fried steak. Very optional, but it will make your pinwheels very tender indeed. Then most recipes call for you to trim off the ends at this point, making a perfect rectangle of beef. But I like to trim these off after rolling up the beef, which I will demonstrate later. Before stuffing, we're going to generously season on both sides with kosher salt and freshly ground black pepper. Then we're going to let it sit at room temperature for at least 30 minutes, which is both going to deeply season the beef and help it retain moisture when grilled. It is during this time that we can begin to discuss stuffins. Let's start with a very elegant steak pinwheel: shiitake mushrooms, spinach, and Gruyere cheese. Got about a pound of shiitake mushrooms that I'm going to thinly slice, and likewise my Gruyere, which I'm also going to thinly slice. Sliced cheese is going to hold its ground a little bit better in the steak than shredded. Then, in the vast majority of cases, you're going to want to pre-cook your ingredients. Mushrooms, onions, peppers, spinach, all these things contain a whole lot of moisture that we want to cook out before we stuff them inside a steak. There's also just no way that they're going to cook through on the grill, so I'm sauteing these mushrooms for about 5 minutes until they've given up their moisture, adding a whole lot of spinach, way more than I think I need because this stuff shrinks, and cooking 2 to 3 minutes just until wilted, or about 1/1000th of its original size. Then I'm going to crush a few cloves of garlic in there and saute those for another 30 seconds to 1 minute until fragrant. Then, since we don't want these things cooking the steak from the inside out, we're going to let them cool completely by spreading them out on a rimmed baking sheet. Once cooled, we can get to stuffing. We're going to start by aligning our steak so that the grain is facing side to side. Spread our mushroom and spinach mixture all over, leaving a 1-inch border on each side. Shingle our cheese on top of that and begin rolling. Now, it is imperative that you're rolling this tightly, evenly, and so that the grain runs down the length of the roll. Then, seam side down, we're going to tie it at 1.5-inch intervals. You want to tie as tightly as possible so you get a nice clean spiral in every pinwheel. Then, optional but especially helpful if you're grilling, you can pierce with a metal or wooden skewer right below each string. Then, the most satisfying part of our day, it's time to cut. And this is why I like to leave the trimmings on the outside of the beef until this stage. You're going to have to cut some off anyway to get a nice clean facade, so you might as well do it now. And as long as you've rolled and tied tightly, you should have yourself a real nice looking steak pinwheel. Keep chopping them up with a long sharp knife, arrange them on a rimmed baking sheet, and these guys are ready for the grill, where we're going to utilize the indirect heat method. Basically start by blasting one side of your grill on maximum heat for 15 minutes, scrub it clean with a grill brush or some steel wool, soak a paper towel in vegetable oil, and use it to wipe down the grates. Then we're going to plop our steak pinwheels in the very hottest parts of the grill and sear on each side for about 3 to 4 minutes. This should hopefully create a crispy barrier through which your cheese and vegetables cannot escape. There will inevitably be some filling loss, but don't worry, about 80% of what's in there is staying in there. Keep the lid closed throughout this process, and once your steaks are seared, we're going to move them over to the cold side of the grill, where our burners are off and the oven-like heat can continue cooking the steaks through without burning them. Then it's time to bust out the thermometer, because there's really no way to know when these guys are done, apart from taking their temperature. About 1 billion different factors can change cook times, the power of your grill, the thickness of your pinwheels, the digestive health of your many pet ferrets. I personally want medium rare, so I'm shooting for 125, 130. Then all there's left to do is let these guys rest for 5 to 10 minutes, take off the string, and dig in. You can definitely serve this with a light salad or some kind of vegetable side, but but it's really an all-in-one meal. It is beefy, it is cheesy, and it's got loads of flavorful veggies. And it's gotta be one of my very favorite utilizations of my grill this or any summer. And this one is so good that even though we had impending dinner reservations, Jess and I ate the whole thing. But this is our fancy pants pinwheel. What other familiar steaky flavors can we put in pinwheel form? How about fajitas? For this, we're gonna start with some fajita vegetables, all manner of peppers and onions, thinly sliced and ready to be sauteed. And then for cheese, I thought we'd use this lovely Oaxaca cheese. Basically sort of like a Mexican mozzarella. So if you can't find Oaxaca, string cheese will actually work in a pinch. To that end, I am shredding this cheese into strings, which are long and will probably stay in the pinwheels more easily. The peppers and onions are being simply sauteed in some vegetable oil. About 10 minutes over medium-high heat until soft and blistered and starting to caramelize. Then I'm lowering the heat, crushing in a few cloves of garlic, adding about a teaspoon of Mexican oregano and ground cumin. I'm also going to add a teaspoon of ground ancho chili powder and some freshly ground pepper and give these guys a toss over medium-low heat just so that their flavors can get to know each other. Once the spices are toasted, we're going to season to taste with kosher salt, give them one last toss, and like the previous fillings, we need to let them cool completely, so we're going to spread them out on a rimmed baking sheet. When it comes time to stuff, I'm going to start by hitting the flank steak with the zest of 1 lime. Then it's pretty much the same procedure as before. Pile on our sauteed veg, follow that with a generous piling of our cheese, once again leaving a 1-inch border around the outside, most importantly at the top, and then beginning to roll tightly. And with this particular flank steak, I had a hole. You're going to see it by my left hand, your right now, but this is not the end of the world so long as we roll tightly and tuck the hole in underneath the seam, like so. Then it's the same old procedure of tying it up, sticking it with skewers, and slicing into pinwheels. Then you might notice that I'm tying this steak up at much larger intervals, resulting in much thicker pinwheels. And I want to assure you that I totally did that on purpose. It's not at all because this was actually my first ever steak pinwheel, and I did not know what I was doing. However, these super thick pinwheels actually present a great opportunity, that being how to make steak pinwheels indoors. It's the same concept. We want to start by blasting them with super high heat, so over medium-high flame we're going to heat some vegetable oil until it is smoking, plop down the pinwheels, and sear for 3 to 4 minutes. And you might be saying, wow dude, you just put cheese in a frying pan, way to screw this up. To which I would say,
hold your treacherous tongue! Thou wouldst be advised to speak less and listen closely.
Just like on the grill, but perhaps even more efficiently, these have formed a leak-proof crust. And once we give them 1 to 2 minutes on their second side, we're going to plop this whole thing into a preheated 375°F oven to finish cooking through. Again, really the only way you're going to be able to determine when they're done is with a thermometer. Let them rest for 10 minutes before removing the skewer, the string, and serving. And this one's also great. It's got all the flavors of steak fajitas with Oaxaca cheese built right in. And despite its ridiculous thickness, it is cooked to a perfect medium rare. But now for the pinwheel that I've been excited for all week, the Philly cheesesteak pinwheel. We're starting with the usual routine, heating some vegetable oil over medium-high heat until shimmering, sauteing a whole lot of onions. This is 2 medium onions, halved and thinly sliced. We're going to saute those for a few minutes until they are just starting to soften before adding some green peppers. Likewise, cut into long strips, and then we're going to saute everybody together for about 5 more minutes until really soft and starting to caramelize. Spread it out, let it cool, and it's time to stuff. Peppers and onions down, trim off the top edge so it's nice and even. And then for the cheese element, I'm using very thinly sliced provolone. You could also use American cheese here, but I'm sorry Philadelphians, whiz will not work. Roll it up, tie it up, skewer it through every inch or two, then give it a slice to reveal a spiral so nice. And before I lose your goodwill with increasingly long rhymes, we're headed out to the grill for good steak and good times. Anyway, usual procedure out here, plop them on the hot side, make sure they're good and seared all over before putting them over to the cool side to finish cooking. Cook to your desired doneness, let them rest for 10 minutes, remove all the restraints, and serve. And there you have it, Philly cheesesteak steak pinwheels. Probably don't need to sell you on this one, it's steak, peppers, onions, and cheese. But for the ultimate pinwheel experience, we must now talk about cocktail pairing. So we're going to make a light, summery, citrusy cocktail I have christened the Zingleton. First up, we're going to make a honey ginger simple syrup, combining 1 cup each water and honey in a medium saucepan, tiny whisking to combine, and bringing to a simmer and letting cook until it reaches 220°F, skimming off the foam that accumulates towards the end of cooking. Then we're going to kill the heat and add 3/4 of a cup of sliced fresh ginger, covering and letting steep until cooled completely before straining and putting into our favorite bottle for long-term storage. Then for the actual cocktail, we're going to cut ourselves an orange garnish. Nice. Then we're going to grab 2 king cubes of the fanciest ice we can find, wrap them up in a clean towel, and give them a smash. Just 2 or 3 smashes or until thoroughly smashed. Then we're going to use this ice to fill a cocktail shaker, shortly followed by 1 1/2 ounces of the Singleton 12-year-old, 3/4 of 1 ounce of freshly squeezed lemon juice, 1/2 of 1 ounce of freshly squeezed and strained orange juice, and 1/2 ounce of our homemade ginger honey syrup. Top up your shaker and make it live up to its name with a thorough shaken. This not only mixes everything together, it aerates and dilutes the cocktail, and you know that it's ready when the entire shaker is frosty. Drop another king cube of fancy ice in a rocks glass, strain your beautiful summery cocktail over top, and garnish with an orange garnish. I'm just going to slice a little notch in my orange wedge, perch it on the rim of the glass, and there you have it. The Zingleton with a Z. Or if you're short on time, you can always do the Singleton plus 2, the Singleton plus any 2 other ingredients, like club soda and lime or bitters and vermouth. Thanks again to the Singleton with an S, single malt Scotch whiskey for partnering with me on this episode. If you're intimidated by Scotch, don't be. The Singleton 12-year-old is easy to enjoy and mixes well in a variety of simple cocktails. Just a few ingredients and a few friends, and you'll be celebrating grilling season the right way. Stay tuned for more from the Singleton, and to get a bottle for yourself, head to the link in the video description.